Guess it wouldn't be a good time to pick your nose or something.
That's right. If you got to do it now.
Guy said one time, don't worry about me, I was coming out of far better places than this.
Laurie says we're good to go.
We're good to go?
Yep. It's 11 o'clock on the dot.
Good morning. My name is Don Popple, and welcome to the Committee of Adjustment meeting for August 11th, 2021. A notice of those in attendance at this meeting will be live streamed on YouTube and recorded. Please note the recording will be linked to the municipal website following the meeting. Our committee today consists of Mr. John Smith, who is Councillor for Ward 4, Mr. Jerry Walker, and Mr. David Bishop. This is a public hearing to consider 3 applications for a minor variance to the municipality zoning bylaw. It's the committee's responsibility to consider all information received to date regarding the requested variances and to hear and consider any comments or questions provided by these applications. 2 of these applications, actually the first 2 that we're dealing with are returning applications, which meant that the decision was deferred from the last meeting and we'll be dealing with them today. Any variances granted by the committee must meet 4 tests, which are very clearly defined in the Planning Act. Requested variances must be minor in nature, must be desirable for the proper development of the land, comply with the general intent of the official plan, and comply with the general intent of the zoning bylaw. If anyone, please note anyone wishes to be notified of a decision, please make a request in writing to the municipality. Do any of the members have any conflict of interest with any of these applications today? Please indicate no by holding your hand.
No, I don't.
No, okay, fair enough. We're good to go. So any oral or written submissions received in advance of the meeting will be verbally read aloud at the time of the application is considered. Information regarding live streaming of the meeting is available at the municipality of Untitled website. All persons who have pre-registered will have an opportunity to present or ask questions about the proposals. Please direct all your questions and comments to the chair. Each registered person will have 5 minutes to provide comments or ask questions. Once finished speaking, the meeting host will mute your microphone. Based on some previous experiences, we'll be enforcing this rule, and you'll be given if your comments go longer than 4 minutes, she's going to give you 1 minute to finish off, and then you'll be muted. So it's important if you're making comments that they are related strictly to the application at hand and nothing about personalities and different things like that. Any oral or written submissions received in advance of the meeting will be verbally read aloud at the time the application is considered. I guess that's all we got to do, right? So that being said, we will carry on with, we'll open the meeting, and we just have a little bit of our own resolutions to deal with. And we need a resolution from a committee to the minutes of the Committee of Adjustment meeting July 14th be adopted as presented. Moved by Mr. Bishop, seconded by Mr. Walker. All in favor? It's carried. You have that. And the first returning file is the Calma people from Harcourt Park, 1296 Grove Street Avenue in Straggler Lake. And as I mentioned earlier, this is a returning file. And I think most of the people in the committee have been at the residence that's involved with this. So Marie Poirier, is she live?
Yep, she's on screen.
So do you have anything to wish to say before we carry on with the discussion, Ms. Poirier?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I just, as always, want to thank staff, and in this case, the committee members as well for taking the time to go out and visit the property. We concur with staff's recommendation, and we would respectfully request that you approve this minor variance. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any members of the committee wish to present any questions to Ms. Poirier or bring up anything that was related to the site visit? Mr. Bishop, you go first.
Dave, may you unmute yourself?
I think you're muted, Dave.
Am I
There we
there
go.
now?
Yeah, you're here.
Thank you. At the last meeting, Ms. Poirier was speaking as to the ability to put a vegetation planting strip in between the building area of this application and the lot line. Could she just elaborate on that a little bit more, please?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. It's my opinion that we can adequately put a vegetative buffer in between the garage and the neighbor's property line. Granted, there's not an awful lot of space, but there are some species of trees that will go straight and narrow and provide an ample buffer. Now, it'll probably take maybe a year to 2 years for the trees to get, maybe 5 to 6 feet in height. But there are some particular species, some spruce species, and also poplar that will provide an ample buffer if the committee would like us to make that a condition of an approval.
Okay.
you.
Based on the site visit, do you want to do some of the committee members want to make a comment on what was displaced there? Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question first of Marie Poirier there. You make the statements in your report that you think this is a very minor variance and it's desirable development for the property. From the site visit, my observation was this is frankly an overdeveloped lot already, and hence the lot coverage issue, but also an extensive gravel driveway and so forth. But the zoning bylaw says that there should be a space between the building and the lot line if you're going to convert it to a residence of 4.5 meters, about 15 feet. And this one is only 1.5 meters. In other words, just under 5 feet. A variance from 15 feet to 5 feet seems pretty significant to me. So how small would it need to be to meet your requirement in terms of being more than minor, if you know what I mean?
Certainly. Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question, Councillor. I would note that in this particular situation, we're dealing with a property that was already developed and has been developed for decades. And the current owners purchased it in this way. And then due to a complaint, they've had to legalize it by some way. And the minor variance is the process to do that. When determining whether something is minor in nature, it's neither a qualitative nor a quantitative formula per se. And the Ontario Municipal Board, or the former Ontario Municipal Board, has ruled that on several occasions. So it's one of assessing the entire situation and looking at it as to what kind of an impact it may have. If this were a new situation where we were constructing a new dwelling, certainly, you would comply with the bylaw. But now that it's an existing situation, we have to look at it and say, is this really posing a huge impact more than that which has existed for decades? You temper that with removing the gazebo, which is going to improve the lot coverage, and adding a vegetative buffer. And it would remain, in my opinion, that this would be minor and desirable for the property, respectfully. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Bishop, do you have any comments on this application?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the site visit was very, very valuable in regard to understanding both the concerns of the neighbors and the applicants for the use that they want to extend. One of the concerns that I recall the neighbor having was the use of the building for a private cabin, and that it was going to cause more traffic. A private cabin is still an allowed use on this property, so we're not trying to change the use of it or expand the use that would have an effect to the neighbor in their concern. The main thing is this proximity to the lot line. Now, the building that is going to be used is already there. And it's legally there as a storage shed or a workshop over top of a garage. So we're not worsening the situation if we proceed to grant this variance. The use, again, as I say, if we were in this situation where they were building a brand new building that was going to meet the setbacks and it was a private cabin, it is an allowed use. So the neighbor's concern in that regard as overuse of the neighboring property is not something that we have to address, in my opinion. Looked at the building again, it's the building, although they might say it's going to affect their view and because of its proximity to the lot line, this building will affect their view in their backyard area, in my submission, and not the main view area, which is the lake and the lake side of the property. The thing that we talked about there, if we were going to grant this, if we remove that tank that's on that east wall, oil tank, and one of the other concerns of the neighbor was light shining out of the window upstairs. Well, maybe we could just get rid of that window that's up there on that side facing the neighbor. And then as Ms. Poirier said, get some kind of a planting strip there. The other thing that was of concern was, and John Smith addressed this, there's a lot of building on this lot. And the Kalmas, when we were there, or when I was there, indicated that they would be willing, if this variance went through, that they would tear down that woodshed that is attached to the other building. And that would give more movement between that other building and the main cottage. So viewing this and looking at it in that fashion, and the fact that this building already exists and that a private cabin is an allowed use, I would recommend that we proceed to grant the variance as suggested, subject to the conditions that I spoke to and that the committee or that the staff has recommended. That's just my view of it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Walker?
Yes, I would have to concur with Mr. Bishop. It is a very tight situation there, but the buildings have been built with a permit. We can't move the building. The idea of relocating or maybe removal of the oil tank would be a good gesture in my mind, but I don't think we should put that in the conditions. The windows are part of the conditions to be removed. And since it is a allowed use on that property, and with staff's recommendation as that being minor in nature, I would like to support the application.
Thank you.
And I would so move that we grant the variance as proposed.
Thank you.
Would you like me to read out
Danielle?
the conditions?
Pardon?
Would you like me to read out the conditions?
Go ahead.
So the conditions for this variance are, one, the variance is applied to the private cabin is generally shown on the property sketch. The county tree Halliburton shoreline preservation bylaw is to apply. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, the gazebo located on the marine facility is to be removed or brought into compliance. Number 4, no decks, openings, so windows or doors, exterior lights or stairs are permitted on the wall adjacent to the south interior side lot line abutting the neighbor. 5, prior to the issuance of a building permit, the drainage, including eaves, gutters, and downspouts for the garage/private cabin are to be directed onto and towards the applicant's property. Number 6, the applicant agrees that the gross floor area and/or structure height of the 2-story accessory building shall not be increased. Number 7, the applicant must contact the building department for a septic review. Number 8, the applicant agrees to contact the building department in regards to a building permit for the shed. Number 9, the applicant agrees to maintain and implement a 1-meter vegetation strip or planting strip, along the property line between 1296 and 1300 Grosbeak Drive to screen the private cabin from neighboring property. 10, all exterior lights shall comply with the zoning bylaw. 11, prior to the issuance of a building permit, the lean-to off the shed is to be removed. Number 12, would you prefer that the oil tank is to be removed as a condition?
They're agreeable to that. They'll put it inside probably.
Okay. Would you like that as a condition or just?
Well,
A
they're in
statement.
agreement with it, so it might as well be down there.
Okay. I will make a note. If the lean-to is removed off the shed, it decreases the lot coverage to 18%.
Right. Okay. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, thank you. Just, I, have concerns about this, and the condition there with regard to downspouts and eaves and so forth. The buildings, none of the buildings in this lot have any eaves troughs or downspouts. Things just flow off the metal roofs onto the ground. And in particular, the building that's in question here, the garage, with the soon to be approved living quarters above it, that area that it drains onto is actually slopes down onto the neighbor's property. So your condition there, is that going to force them to put eaves troughs with downspouts on the garage? Is that what that condition means? That they need to install eaves troughs and downspouts on the garage?
Jeff?
Thank you. Great question. And I'm just reading the condition right now, and I don't believe it does require it. So if that's something, it basically says, the way I read it anyways, if there are existing downspouts and eaves troughs, they should be directed onto their own property, which would comply with the Drainage Act.
Didn't see any eaves troughs there at all, and maybe the comments. Do you have eaves troughs? Were they just invisible to me, or? Yeah, there are no eaves troughs on any of these buildings, and particularly with the building in question here, the garage and the soon-to-be approved living quarters above it. I do believe there should be some eaves troughs and downspouts that keep the flow from this large building on the Commons property. So I would like to.
Would you have a problem with that, Luke?
No, it's
I
fine.
don't know that they can hear us. One sec.
We can hear you.
Yep.
They can hear us?
Yeah, we can direct it. It's just eventually going to flow back towards the slope of the grade, right? But we'll put it out into the middle of our property, I guess, to slow down the flow.
Marie also has a question.
Okay.
Yeah, if the downspouts were at the front of the garage, obviously a lot of that water then would be absorbed on your lot, as opposed to right now it flows directly onto the neighboring property.
Yep, yeah, that's fine.
Somebody told me one time it never rains in Harcourt.
I think it only rains in Harcourt.
Marie, did you wish to make a comment?
Yes, I would, please, Mr. Chair. Pardon me, it's against provincial law for anyone to have water from their property flow onto someone else's property to cause a detriment. So that sort of stopgap measure is there. The neighbors can always, make a complaint if they feel that it's it's problematic for them. But I think that this can also be achieved through undertaking a few minor drainage works, perhaps a French drain or some tile drain to, direct the water toward and spread it properly and evenly so it doesn't destroy the columnist property either. So I would just hope that the condition isn't binding on putting up eaves troughs when that may not be appropriate, and perhaps doing drainage works is a much more appropriate way of keeping the water contained to the common property. I'll leave that to the Commons and you to discuss, but I would hate to see us bound by a decision to put eaves troughs on if we find at the end of the day we can't put eaves troughs on for some reason. I would just prefer to have the flexibility to deal with the neighbor's perceived concern. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And perhaps we could generalize a proposed condition that drainage from the subject building is to comply with the Drainage Act. Something like that. Would that be sufficient?
Would that be acceptable with you, Mr. Smith?
Well, I would prefer that we have eaves troughs on the building. In fact, it's a good stewardship practice. Love Your Lake program. Anybody that does any environmental reviews generally encourages eaves troughs on a building that's, particularly within 30 meters of a lake, which is the case of most of the buildings in this property. But, only one person's view, and the committee will decide.
Marie has another question.
Who does?
Marie?
Marie? Did you have another comment, Marie?
I do, please, Mr. Chair, and I just, through you, want to, Councillor Smith, I truly appreciate what you're saying. I guess what my concern is as I'm starting to think about this, is if you want us to put in that vegetative buffer between the neighbor's property and the building, that could be problematic with respect to eaves troughs and then them getting clogged and then causing perhaps a bigger problem. So I don't think that we rule out eaves troughs or drainage spouts, but I think the more general approach to complying with the Drainage Act would be appropriate in case we find that, depending on what tree species are chosen, we get pine needles and leaves stuck in the eaves trough, and then they get backed up and we got a bigger problem than we had in the first place. Just some thoughts. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I understand, and I guess that comes down to property maintenance. I have eaves troughs that I have to clean every fall because leaves do gather. That's part of the problem, but they serve a purpose. But contrary with some of the others here, I do look at the municipal bylaw that says that living quarters above a garage should be at 4.5 meters from the property line. And although this building was approved, it was approved as storage, and an illegal act converted it, and didn't bother getting approval. And the variance that moves from 15 feet to 5 feet, to me is pretty substantive. And I don't see this being a desirable change. To me, it's not minor in nature. Having people living in that second floor, there's a lot more activity through that than there is with using it for storage, which is what the zoning bylaw would normally allow for. And we have a lot that's overbuilt. Even with the removal of one lean-to, it's still going to be 18% as opposed to 15%. Again, a pretty substantial variance of more than 20%. We've got pushback here even against what I think are reasonable conditions. So just one per party's perspective.
Can you draft? How do you want to handle that?
Well, I think before we proceed to a vote, I think first we need to clarify a couple things with regards to whether the committee wants to include a condition to remove the tank if they do approve the variances. The second one with regards to the removal of the lean-to, whether they want that, therefore reducing the requested variance to 18% from 18.9. And lastly, the condition with regards to to drainage, whether the committee would prefer eaves troughs and downspouts or some flexibility as requested by the agent for the applicant, that the drainage just comply with the Drainage Act. So I think those three things need to be addressed, and then we can move forward. And whether you want to have
Well, the
some
oil
votes.
tank is going to be, yes, it's,
Okay.
and what was the second one?
Did the committee want the lean-to removed?
Yes.
Luke
It's not a
does have
lean-to, it's a
question.
woodshed.
Well, yeah, they reference it as a lean-to, but there is a question. Luke has a question.
Bruce does?
Luke?
Oh, Luke. Sorry there, Luke. You used to be down in this corner and now you're on the top corner up here. So sorry. Would you like to comment on this, Luke?
Yeah, as for the downspouts coming off the proposed bunkie, even if we did put it in the middle of our property and we did berm up with some vegetation, that's going to slow down the flow going to the neighbors. Would that be okay? Or do you guys want a French drain in?
Well, that's what we have to decide.
Yeah, and I don't know necessarily. I guess the committee can make a decision today. There's, as Ms. Poirier mentioned, there are various options available to them to comply with the Drainage Act. I think as long as they comply with that, staff would be satisfied. But then again, it's up to the committee how they want to proceed.
Mr. Walker.
Jerry, you may unmute yourself, please.
I think you're on mute.
There we go.
There you go.
Okay,
Welcome
so anyway, I think there was a good point made about provincial law or about draining to a neighbor's property. And I think if that's complied with, that basically covers this whole discussion. You know, so it's up to the applicant to make sure that his water is not going on the neighbor's property by provincial regulation. So, you know, I don't see the necessity to jurisdict that we make them put eave troughs on, because there's already a regulation in place to stop water from going to your neighbor's property. So I don't think we overcomplicate things. You already got a law or a regulation in place. So that's
Fair
my
enough.
comment.
Mr. Bishop?
Should we not, if we're going to go on that direction as far as compliance with the Drainage Act, should we not, before the use is allowed, to have a plan filed with the municipal offices showing how the Drainage Act is going to be complied with?
How the which? What is it?
Well, what committee member Bishop's saying is he would like to see some sort of plan indicating that the property complies with the Drainage Act before the use of the private cabin is permitted on the second story. So maybe something prior to occupancy, that the applicants are to prove that the building complies with the Drainage Act, something along that line.
Marie also has a question.
I'll be right with you, Marie. Ms. Poirier, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a question. We're talking about this, and now we're talking about filing the drainage plan. Do we even know what the problem is at this point, the extent of it, where the water is flowing on the neighbor's property? Have they provided any photos or anything? Because I don't know how we're gonna do a drainage plan if we don't even know what the problem is yet. So I guess my question is, you know, has there been some evidence provided so we know what the problem is and what the extent of the problem is?
I don't believe there's anything's been submitted indicating that there has been issues with drainage. Typically when there's a setback variance like this close to the line, staff try and think of any potential issues and therefore offer proposed conditions to help mitigate those issues, such as we mentioned, compliance with the Drainage Act, removal of windows, removal of decks, doors, lights, that kind of thing, just to help mitigate the variance if it is approved. So, but to date, we haven't received anything that I'm aware of.
The Calmas have a question.
Yes.
The Calmas?
John Smith, speak.
Thank you. One other question. There's talk of removing the lean-to from the woodshed. That's a relatively small lean-to. hence it only shifts coverage from 18.9 down to 18.0. The larger lean-to is on the garage building. Is there any consideration of removing that lean-to to get down closer to the 15% lot coverage?
Well, that's open for discussion. We did, both of us did speak with the owners of the property with regards to that. And in fairness to them, the larger lean-to, which is attached to the garage, is primarily used to store his boat in the winter. So whether we want to get into that, that building is a fairly substantial building, and even the lean-to attached to it is very, very well built building. And it'd almost be a shame to see that part of it go. As far as the woodshed goes, it's probably going to clean up a lot of stuff for them and open it up. I know it doesn't bring them into compliance, but at least so if you want to pursue that, then we can talk to them about that. Mr. Bishop?
Yeah, I hope we don't get, I want to make sure that we're doing the right thing here, but I appreciate what John is speaking to, but as I go through the notes here, everything has been by permit. So I'm wrestling with, and I appreciate that other lean-to is substantial in size and it is covering the lot, but the indications are that the only building permit we don't have is for that lean-to shed that we're talking about being removed. But everything else was done by permit.
Right.
So how do I overcome that?
Fair enough.
Well, it's a fair question that maybe the building department, when a permit was approved, didn't have all of the information in terms of lot coverage. They looked at the structure of the building. It's up to the owner to ensure that they comply with the law. The building department gave a permit based on building plans, and probably wasn't asked to judge lot coverage at the time. It's a question here that I struggle with, because there's so much contravention of the zoning bylaws that were put in place, by council in its days, in its wisdom. And we're being asked to approve illegal activity, which is what's happened here after the fact. I understand it's not illegal activity by the current owners, but previous owners basically ignored the laws, went ahead and did what they wanted to do in their own interests, rather than observing the standards that had been established by the municipal councils of the day. And if we expect people to honor and obey the various laws that municipalities put in place, simply rubber stamping after the fact, what was illegal activity, doesn't encourage respect for the various municipal bylaws. And so that's my primary concern there.
That's fair enough. Daniel?
I will just follow up on Dave's comment there that, so that's why there's a condition number 8 is saying that the applicants agreed to contact the building department in regards to a building permit for the shed, as the shed was not built with a permit.
Marie?
Yes. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I was just a point of clarification that if a building permit is applied for, then the chief building official is obliged to ensure that the permit, as appears, complies with all applicable law, and that includes the zoning bylaw. So I appreciate that the one structure was built without a permit, but I think what the minor variance process here is, and what the Planning Act provides for situations like this, is to legalize things or grant variances to zoning bylaws or actual zoning bylaw amendments. And that's permitted under provincial legislation. Sometimes every situation just doesn't fit the zoning bylaw. And in this case, I do understand that the previous owners built the shed without a permit, but the current property owners have not done that, and we're just looking to legalize what's already there. Nothing's really changing and hasn't changed over decades.
Let's be sure that, so it's the building permit that's missing on the lean-to on the back of the garage. Is that correct?
So it's for the shed.
Well, it's for the shed.
So the
But
shed and the lean-to that's in the middle of a lot close to the dwelling were not built with a permit. The carport and the garage were built with a permit.
with a permit, yeah, okay. Well,
So if it's, I think it would be,
they offered that.
they're only taking down the lean-to, the illegal lean-to on the illegal building. So that's, we're taking down half of the illegal structure, what they're offering to do.
Well, that's because we asked them to do that. As a matter of fact, both lean-tos came into the discussion on when I was there on the site visit, and quite frankly, I don't think it's quite fair, because these people didn't build it. Somehow that thing happened, whatever, and so now we're expecting them to correct all these things. We'll be a pretty busy committee of adjustment if we start correcting everything that's wrong in Haliburton County, because even in my little boog out there in Drag Lake, I see misregulations every day, and I'm astounded that they've taken place. But when you rely on complaints to enforce your bylaw, that's what happens. And I think that in itself represents part of the problem. Anyway, Mr. Walker.
I do, Danielle just mentioned that the lean-to on the garage was built with a permit. That was my understanding. We could dissect this whole project. And as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, every file that comes forward, we could dissect it till the cows come home. The applicants are trying to make this comply. They're bringing it into conformity for the best they can. They've agreed to remove what was asked. They've also agreed to make sure water is not going to go on the neighbor's property. They're going to comply with all the conditions that are listed. So with that being said, I'd like to just go forward with my motion to approve the applicants as presented.
Any further comments? Let's do that. You got the paperwork?
May I just have
Yeah.
clarity on one of the conditions? So the condition number 5, saying that prior to the issuance of building permit, the drainage, including eaves, that one's to be removed, and you would prefer it saying prior to occupancy of the private cabin, the drainage from the subject property is to comply with the Drainage Act?
Complies with the drainage act.
Okay.
Well, the same thing with the first one. They know they've got, well, first of all, we know how well they get along with the neighbor. So if there is going to be a complaint, it's not going to be very far away. And unfortunately, that's the way it is. So if we ask that they comply to the Drainage Act, then that'll be the condition.
Perfect.
So, you got the formula there? Okay, so I need a mover and a seconder. So it was moved by Mr. Gerald Walker. And it was seconded by David Bishop. Be resolved the committee's the committee's decision with respect to file D13 MV 2021-11 be recorded as follow. The decreased provision in section 3.1 to permit a private cabin have a south interior side lot setback of 1.5 meters or 4.9 feet as opposed to the required 4.5 meters. Granted, please indicate your support by holding your arm up. Two beats one. It's carried. An increased provision in section 5.2 to permit a lot within the WR4L zone to have a lot coverage of 18% as opposed to the permitted 15% granted. Please indicate you. It's carried. It's carried. We're going to move on. There is an appeal program, Luke. Our decisions are subject to appeal. There's a 20-day appeal period, so I don't think it's going to affect anything you got to do, but you have to be aware of that. That's all. Thank you very much.
John, for the next case, I'm just going to ask that if you turn off your video, and then we'll bring you back forward for the last one. Thank you.
Oh yeah, you can go to that. Yeah, okay,
I got you.
fair enough. So the second one is the returning file debris. Are they here?
I'm just bringing them on the screen. There we go.
Mr. DeVries, are you live? I know you're alive, but are you live?
Yeah, we're live.
You're there.
Can you hear us
You're there.
now? Good.
Yeah, you're here. I think we could start off, since this was also a returning file. I'm sure the committee members will have some comments on respect to the visit. So, Daniel.
I was just going to say the application was deferred for 2 additional variances.
Right.
The additional variances were for the increase of height for the log cabin.
Right.
Mr. DeVries does have a photo. Would you like me to put that on the screen and he can explain it?
Well, they were both there, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I don't think we showed you, like we did make the comment that the log cabin was falling apart, the logs on the bottom, but this particular photo is, it just shows you some of the damage. So that we thought it'd be good to at least show you that.
okay. Can you put that up there?
Yep.
So that's kind of like, that's just one area that we're dealing with. It's
It definitely has to be raised.
yeah, it's pretty bad. So, besides insects and ants and stuff like that, we also have a lot of problem with rodents because it's almost impossible to plug all the holes in the bottom there.
I don't think we have a problem with that. I can't speak for the committee members, but you pull that, yeah. So we'll get a comment from Jerry and Dave with respect to that. Mr. Bishop?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm hearkening back to an application we had up at Kinesis Lake where they were dealing with an older log building, and we were dealing with the height of it at that point in time. And something that we spoke about in regard to that log building was that it had been there so long that everything had shrunken down. So maybe when it was originally built, it was a little bit higher than it was at that point in time. And I wouldn't be surprised that that would be a factor in this particular case as well. The other thing that I noted while we were out there is that, this spot's got a little bit of a historical attitude in my suggestion. In the saving of that building, I think is valuable not only to the ownership of the applicant, but I think it's valuable to the history of the area as well. So any reasonable attempt, in my opinion, to assist in preserving that building in a fashion that shows what it was intended to be in the beginning, and also now, if it's refurbished, it gives the applicant more room and better room to accommodate his family use of the whole of the property. So I'm in favor generally, Mr. Chair, of this restoration being done properly and keeping that building preserved.
Okay, Jerry? Need your button on.
I'd have to agree with Mr. Bishop. The nostalgia of that property is unique. And to be able to preserve that old log cabin is, I think it's essential. And I don't have any problem with the granting a height improvement there. There's, I think it's, there's some other parts of the application that may be a little different and maybe a little overboard, but as far as the height, I have no problem with restoring that old building to a good condition. I think it's very useful.
Okay, what's your feeling with respect to the deck on the front?
So the deck that was built, I believe, was built without a permit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was built right after we put the road in place. It was the very first thing we did.
Yeah, without a permit, correct?
Right.
So is there any way to reduce the encroachment on the waterfront of the deck? And then we're also, I think, talking about the addition. Now, we're not talking about that right now, but I think we have to look at maybe a little give and go here. I do have an issue with the size of the addition, and I know maybe not talking about that right now, but it's all relevant to that main building. Trying to encroach that a little more on the waterfront, I don't think that's necessary. So is there any give and go on the deck and the addition? I'll ask Mr. DeVries.
On the deck, I would say no, because it's very difficult for us to do it. To make it compliant, we'd have to, well, there may be more than one way that I don't know. But if we wanted to just basically deal with the measurements, then we would have to cut a big chunk of that deck off, which would take away quite a bit from that outside living space. So I think that would be extremely hard to do, for us to do. On the other side, on the addition to the house, when you folks were there, there are questions related to how we're going to do that. In other words, are we going to put proper footings and foundations, et cetera, et cetera? And yes, that was all part of the plan. The encroachment, in my mind, if we just look at the last applicant that we had, where they went from 4.5 meters to 1.5 meters, we're asking for, I think it's 33 feet down to 28 feet. So we're asking for 5 feet variance.
The only thing is that you're asking for 5-foot variance in the water setback.
Right.
And that's the issue that I have.
Okay.
And I think that's the issue that some of our committee members have. And,
so,
I don't think we're going to hold fast to. I think you can almost do more damage taking that deck apart than leaving it the way it is.
Right.
However, we do have an issue with respect to the addition.
Okay, so if we were basically, if we modified the design of the addition to basically be within the I believe is a 10 meter dimension, would that be okay? Because then we're not. Yeah, we're complying with the bylaw then, right?
Mr. Chair,
yes and no. Go ahead, Dave.
He's suggesting that his addition would meet the setback requirements. And if that's the case, then we don't deal with it. It's not a minor variance at all.
Right.
It's within the bylaw. So,
yeah.
So of course you could, anything that you were allowed to do within the bylaw, you can go ahead and do.
Jeff?
Okay, I think that's reasonable then. If we in fact want to proceed with that, we have to make sure that that's done and conform with the bylaw.
Okay.
Okay, I think that gives us some flexibility there. And I think that's a concession that we're willing to make.
This is a bit of a unique situation because there's 2 existing dwellings on the property. So not only does the dwelling need to comply with setbacks, section 3.19, which deals with legal non-compliant structures, but it also says that when you have two dwellings, you can't increase the encroachment area of either, or the height of either. So it's not just complying with setbacks, he would be okay. It's something the committee needs to look at and say, okay, we have two dwellings this close to the water. Do we think it meets all four tests for them to increase the size of both dwellings? We've already discussed the one, and the committee has said that they are okay. It appears to have sunk and appear to be fine with it being raised to meet modern construction standards. But the committee should review this new request in the context, do they think it's meets all four tests to now increase the size of the second dwelling so close to the lake? So it's not just a matter of meeting those setbacks. It's because they have two dwellings on the property.
Okay. Where do you want to go with this?
Well, I'm okay with living within that first bylaw, the one we talked, the 10-meter setback. I'm okay with that. We could modify our design and comply with that. And then, you know, if we get the option of, like, we're not necessarily, we have to kind of look at the feasibility of modifying the design to be able to do that. So, but that's something we're prepared to do.
Mr. Bishop?
If the modified design is still going to require a minor variance, then we need to see the modified design.
I got to understand. I thought we had said a few minutes ago that if we abide by the 10-meter bylaw, then we don't have to ask for a variance. Are we now saying there's still a variance that we have to ask for?
Yeah. Yeah. He's the one who brought up the point that there are two dwellings on the property, and that's what changed this thing. So can you respond to that?
I can expand on that if you want. So if you look at variance G, it says a variance to section 3.19A5 to permit an increase to the gross floor area of a dwelling when there are two dwellings on the lot and only one is permitted. So currently the variance asks for 336 square feet as opposed to the permitted 0. I'm not sure how much square footage on the new design would be, but there would still have to be a variance to permit expansion of a dwelling when there's two on a lot.
Okay, so that's fine. I think we're going to have to decrease the size of the addition to comply with the first bylaw. Then I would say yes, we'd like to apply for the variance to that other area.
But you're going to have to come back to us for that, because basically, I think that the only problem we have with what you're requesting is the addition to one of the buildings. We're prepared to give you forget about the deck, forget about the raising, and I concur with Councillor Bishop that you're going to improve it by making, otherwise that building will fall over.
Yeah.
And so that's where we're at.
Okay, and then I guess the last one was the living space above the garage. Like we haven't talked about that yet today.
Well, I'm not so sure we have a huge problem with that, but
okay, I did come back with changed measure the correct measurements based on your direction when you guys were on site.
and so how much is the square footage?
I can't recall, but I've given it to Danielle.
630 square feet.
How much?
630.
630, is that with all the eaves off there?
Correct.
As opposed to 484?
Yeah, so it's permitted to have 484, but the current dimensions would be 630.
Okay. Well, my thinking is that we trade that off against the cancellation of the addition. He can put his people up there.
Okay, so that's fair. So if we in fact
my feeling, I haven't asked the committee members yet.
Okay, I'll carry on then.
Okay, Dave first, then Jerry.
I generally concur with that, Mr. Chair. the opportunity there in regard to the second story and reducing it to just a little over 600 as opposed to the 484. I see no problem in that regard. It's not really changing the nature of the whole compound. With respect of that portion of the application with the reduced square footage, I'm in favor of proceeding with that approval. And so we do have 3 portions of grant here. One is regard to that area above the garage. The other is the deck dock, and the other is the raising of the log cabin for its refurbishing. But the other aspect is denied, in my opinion, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Walker?
And I would concur with Mr. Bishop. We're dealing with the 3 parts and omitting the actual addition onto the main structure. So I would agree with that.
Okay, have you got the paperwork in for that? Yeah.
I would say variance C, F, and G. If the addition is not going to be permitted, those are the ones that would have to be denied.
And just based on the discussion, if the committee does proceed based on discussion, it appears condition 4 may not be needed, whereas the applicants are to obtain a building permit, the addition to the dwelling.
Okay, so we have to deal with all of these, right?
Yes, there are a lot. I would read them out one by one just because there are a lot and there was a lot of discussion today.
Okay,
so that everybody
bear with me
understands.
here. Then the first one is a variance to section 3.1 D, permit the gross floor area of a private cabin to be 58.53 square meters or 630 square feet, which exceeds the permitted gross floor area of 45 square meters or 484 square feet. Granted. Please indicate your support by holding your hand up. It is granted. Variance section 3.1 to permit the gross floor area of a secondary story of an accessory building to be 58.5. That's what we just did.
It's just the way the bylaws work.
Okay. Second story of accessory building be 58.53 square meters, 630 square feet, which exceeds the permitted gross floor area of 45 square meters or 484 square feet. Is granted. That's carried. Indicate your support. Decrease in section 5.2 to have permitted dwelling to have a minimum water setback of 7.9 meters as opposed to the legal non-complying water setback of 10 meters. So we're legalizing the one building, right?
It's legal at 10 meters. So this is the variance to request the building to move closer to the highway.
But that's the one that he wanted to add on to, right?
For the addition.
This is for the addition to the dwelling to move closer to the water.
Is denied. Carried. Variance to section 3.7 permit a deck attached to the main building to extend 3.7 meters or 12 feet as opposed to the permitted 3.3 meters or 9.84 feet is granted. Carried. Variance in section 3.19 to permit an increase in the area of encroachment of an attached deck within 10 meters of the high water mark of 12.6 square meters or 135 square feet as opposed to the required 0 meters. That's the other one, isn't it?
It's for the deck as well.
Yeah, there's 2 variances required to legalize the deck.
Yeah. That's the one at the other building, correct?
It's the attached deck still.
Oh, that's still the same one.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's granted. Okay. How many of these have we got? Mr. DeVries, I'm running out of paper.
Well, I asked for 3 requests and they turned into a bunch more.
Well, I think we're cleaning up some old stuff here. A variance to section 3.19 to permit an increase in the area of encroachment of a main dwelling within 10 meters of the high water set mark of 3.3 square meters, 35 square feet as opposed to required 0 meters is. Which one is that?
It's for the addition.
That's the cabin?
That's for the addition.
This is for the addition.
No, that's
So this is for the addition, so that's denied,
Right.
correct?
Yes.
Jerry? Variance to section 3.19, permit an increase in the gross floor area of a dwelling where there are two dwellings on the lot, only one permitted of 336 square feet, as opposed to required 0 meters. Which one is that?
The
Again,
addition.
this is also the addition attached to the main dwelling.
That's also denied, correct? Variance to section 3.19 to permit an increase in the structure height of the main dwelling within 10 meters of high water mark of 0.92 meters or 3 feet, as opposed to requires 0 meters, 0 feet. That's for the old building, that's granted. Correct? And the variances of section 3.19 permit an increase in the structure height of the building from two dwellings on the lot, only one is permitted. 3 feet as opposed to required 0 is granted. Same thing. Okay. Mr. DeVries, you got everything you asked for other than your extension on your the one building.
Okay, I get that. I understand that. I was not quite aware that there was a second bylaw. Like, I realized the first one, a 10-meter setback. I never knew there was a second one about that we also had to comply with, but that's fine. We could put that on the shelf for now. And we understand that if we ever want to go down there, we need to design it first so you can see what we're in fact planning or considering. But at this point, we understand that that's off the table. Yeah.
You're very fair, gentlemen, and we appreciate your cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. We can bring Councillor Smith back into the meeting for the next application.
He's on top of it.
We bring John Smith back?
Yep.
Welcome back, Mr. Smith. Did you bring the coffee with you?
No copy.
The last case we're dealing with today is Mr. Figuera on Sunnyside Street in the township of Dysart. Are you alive? Is he live?
Bringing him on.
You gonna bring him on? Where is he?
Loading. Mr. Figuera, I'm trying to bring you forward as a panelist.
Oh, what?
Here he comes.
You should. Is he there?
He's on the screen. I just need to ensure that he unmutes himself or turns on his
We
video.
may proceed without him. Oh, there he is.
Hello.
Mr. Figuera, welcome here.
Thank you very much.
I'll let you start this off with what you're looking for and how we can help you and how we can help you.
Okay, so I guess recently I just made a small change to our design. Originally, I was asking for a larger building to be built on the lot on Sunnyside, and due to the size that we've seen on the lot and budget constraints, we scaled it down from what it originally was at 2,494 square feet down to just a second, down to about 1,831 square feet plus a garage. So we were asking for, originally the R1 zoning stated it was allowed 35% lot coverage if I was connect to the sewer system, but unfortunately going across the right of way that the township owns and into the sewer down at the bottom of, I think, Pine Street, we couldn't do that because of too much blasting. So we have to put in a private septic system, which is going to be reducing the property lot coverage down to 15%. So we've asked for a variance for the percentage and also the setback from the road, because we can meet the lot setback at 7.5 meters, but we're probably going to be from the center of the road, and due to everyone else, I think on the entire road, they're around 14 or 15 meters. So I think we asked for a setback of 13 meters.
Okay. Have any questions? Have anybody been to this property? I know I've been. Mr. John Smith, everybody's been there. So, do you have any questions for this gentleman? I spent some time with your next door neighbor. He's curious why you don't buy that 10 feet from the township.
I know the township would love for me to purchase that. And it had been consideration, but you know what? That might be still in the works. Who knows? We might buy that little bit of a section that goes down. We could, depending on if it's a good price. The committee might even put in a good word for me.
Mr. Bishop.
Yeah, I just have a few questions of the gentleman here, if I may direct them to him, either directly or through you, Mr. Chair. But when you bought this lot, you knew exactly what it looked like and what the building constraints would be, did you not?
When we bought it was in February. It was snow covered. We knew that there was going to be some setbacks, but when we bought it, we were looking at the 35% lot coverage, which we met that no problem. We were at 21% or 22%. It was when I submitted the site plan approval for the building department to grant me preliminary approval. What happened was one of the staff had checked one more item on the approval process, and then said that if we were going to put in a private septic system, it was reduced down to 15%, which we were not aware of. Just the way the building code, the zoning bylaw stated, there was a section in R1, 35%, but then there was a little bracket J. I didn't notice the J, nor did the building department officials notice the J in brackets. And then when they did a little further checking, they then saw the section J, which noted if a private sewer system was to be put on the property, it was reduced down to 15%.
Just think of all the money you saved.
I know, tell me about it.
So even though you got caught with that aspect or whatever we're going to say, the lot still could and can accommodate a residential building that would meet all the setbacks and coverage requirements. Is that not fair?
Not for the dream home that we've designed for it. We had to scale it back originally. We had to scale back the size of the home. And I had the works department out there to see if I could connect to the township sewer, which is what's usually recommended. And then it was just going to be too much money to blast across that township right away to connect to the sewer system.
But I appreciate that, but so you've got a lot that can have a house on it and meet the bylaws, but you want to put a dream home on it? Something that you just desired?
I work for Discovery Dream Homes. We've worked in the Peterborough or Haliburton area for the last 15 years, and we put a specific model that we love to live in, and seems to be popular. So that's what we wanted to put on this property, was a home scale down from the original design. We scaled it down just recently. I don't know if the staff has submitted the updated design compared to the original one that I did submit.
Yeah, we've got that. Yeah.
So that's our intention, is to put a home that we want built on that property.
Fair enough. Mr. Walker?
So it looks like the applicant is caught in that bylaw. If he could be on the sewer system, his dream home would be allowed, but since it's a septic system, it's not. I have no problem with the lot coverage part of the application. The one part that I did have a little concern with is the setback from the street for parking of guests. Just to be sure that, if a car is pulling in or a truck off the street, can they get off the street to allow for sight and safety of exiting and entrance of the lot? So that would be my concern on the application.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, thanks. So I just want to be sure that the documentation that we received that I reviewed refers to 21% lot coverage. Is that still what we're looking for, or is
No.
it something less than that now?
There's less than that. It's seven, isn't it? 17%? 17%.
So it's 17% versus 15%.
Yeah, and the allowable amount on the bylaw is 15%.
Yeah. Okay.
That's correct.
And so the street setback, why would it be good to have this building, closer to the street? In other words, a lesser setback than the neighboring properties. If others have been able to build on their lot and deal with the slope there and have a setback of, I think in some cases 15 meters, why would we be approving this one at 13 meters? What's the rationale for that?
It's where the garage bumps out. It's hard to put the garage back where it's supposed to be because of the drop off of the rock, and I want to minimize any blasting towards my neighbor's property. Not only that, there's a large 100 to maybe 150-year-old hemlock at the back that we want to retain as part of the architectural feature of that lot. And if we push the building back, we're going to be taking down a lot more trees, which is a nice vegetation buffer between our house that's potentially going to be built there and the neighbors to the south.
Okay, Mr. Bishop, sorry.
I'm just wondering, how did you establish the measurement? Where did you get your point for the center of the roadway in terms of coming to this distance from the center of the road plus your interior lot setback?
So the road setback is the lot setback to start the building is 7.5. So I measured 7.5 into the lot, and then from the lot, I determined from that measurement to the center of Sunnyside Street, which came up to about 13 to 14 meters. So I just went to the center of the road.
So it's not an accurate measurement, it's just your foot feeling as far as where the center of the road is.
It's my accurate measuring because there's a crest in the road, and there's where they paved the one side of the road and they paved the other side of the road. There's a seam down the middle.
If we were where you're looking at the garage, people don't park garages get built and people never put their car in it. They end up using it for storage, and then the car gets parked in front of the garage doors. You're going to be right tight on the street there. There was no indication when I was out there as to where the actual front of the garage was going to be, and no markings of the building. So I had to, quote, pace it off. But when you look at the situation, you're going to be, any car that's parked in front of that garage door is going to be tight to the street. I think you're going to accommodate the situation, I think you're going to have to move that garage back a few more meters if there is going to be any relief at all. You're changing the character of the neighborhood in terms of trying to come closer. I know you're talking about a dream home, but we all have a dream home. Sometimes it won't fit on a particular lot.
Well,
Can you live with a 15-meter setback?
I could live with a 15-meter setback.
That'd give them enough, be a lot better than what he was asking for. I think.
Speaking to the committee members' comment, we're going to have also parking in front of our entrance. So we're going to be able to pull out, park and pull in front of our home, and then drive out to the street. And I measured off my neighbors. I went to my neighbor to the east, and I measured his front of his building to the road, and it was 16 meters. The center of the road, it was 16 meters.
Yeah, I was there yesterday.
Yeah. So I paced that off with the measuring tape, 100-foot measuring tape. It was 16 meters from his front of. So I could live with 15.
Yeah. Councillor Bishop?
Yeah, that that assists it. And if he can make his parking area more or less over to uphill so that he's not parking right in front of his garage, but this certainly would help, that 15 feet. But
Meters.
or 15 feet, I beg your pardon. But I would like, Mr. Chair, in a condition that setback be established by a surveyor.
The surveyors will pin everything before I even build. That's just what we do.
Okay. Mr. Smith, you had a question?
Yeah, so if the neighbors have been able to do a 16 meter setback, and the bylaw calls for 17 and a half, and I understand, slope and so forth, but why would we go to 15 for this property? I mean, the principle here that, we want to build a big house on a small lot. And when you've got a small lot, there are certain restrictions you have to rein in. And, hence the rules around lot coverage and setbacks. And, if we've got one existing building that's 16 meters, I'd like to see this one be consistent with that. Otherwise, we're just kind of keep creeping forward and increasing the variances here.
The only way I arrived at the 15 meters was that probably gives him enough room. If he doesn't pull his car into the garage, he's not going to have it stuck right on the street. So, but anyway, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The one thing the committee might want to consider in this instance with regards to parking is that the applicants are actually required to park on their own property. So there's that 7.5 meter setback that applies, and the proposed development doesn't comply with that. So the additional from the 7.5 to 17.5, that additional 10 is more for the municipality with regards to maintenance. So the applicant would not be permitted to park on that additional space other than 7.5 meters setback from the front lot line. So I just wanted to bring that up because we've been discussing parking in that area. He still is limited to that area on his property.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I do appreciate Mr. Smith's comments in that regard, but let's, one of the reliefs that we can be allowed to grant is in regard to topography of a particular lot. I agree that maybe we could scale the size of the house down. But this lot has some tremendous difficulties. And one of the opportunities we have as a committee is to grant a variance that would accommodate lots that have those physical difficulties. I don't know what would happen, and I don't know how the construction would work or how much more severe the building would become if we did push it to the 17 and a half. So that's one of the reasons why I'm willing to suggest those 15 feet. The 16 feet has come up again, but I thought the gentleman said when he measured his neighbor first, they were complying with a 15-foot setback.
From meters.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Chair. I'm too old-fashioned. So I appreciate what Mr. Smith is saying, but I think we've got a lot that was created and we have to accommodate it to some extent because of its physical nature.
You can still buy that 10 feet.
That's another.
Danielle first and then Jerry.
I just wanted to comment that we did receive comments from the Public Works Department saying that the proposed building and the setbacks do not impede maintenance, and they would be issuing an entrance permit for this property.
Okay. Jerry?
I was just going to mention that as well, that we did get a note from the Rob Cavallon said there wouldn't be any issues. And also, I can appreciate the 16 meters. I think this lot is a little steeper than the neighboring lot. It is quite,
the road
quite steep. So I have no problem with the 15 meter. Mr. Figuera has mentioned that he can live with that and it's a good compromise. So I would agree with that.
I know.
We did receive some comments from the public. Would you like me to read them out?
Absolutely.
Perfect. So we did receive, so on August 5th, we received an oral comment or concerns from the adjacent neighbor, Stan Watt. Mr. Watt questioned where the applicants were going to park, and if they're to park in front of the garage now, how would the applicant address the removal, the snow removal, pardon me. Mr. Watt is also concerned about the reduced visibility in the winter around snowbanks. Mr. Watt also questioned if the building could be pushed back or changed the location due to heavy traffic as well as speeding, just as a safety concern. There is another additional comment from Greg and Marlene Sparling. They are on the call today. Yeah, so from the south, they are on the call today and they wish to speak. They wish to speak. Would you like me to bring them in?
Sure.
Greg and Marlene are on the screen.
Hi.
Greg or Marlene, would you wish to speak to this application?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Please speak up as loud as you can.
Our concern being right below the new building down the hill. My concern is the effect of will this be more water coming down the hill in the spring for us? Is like he's going to ensure that the drainage from his eaves troughs and the septic, we're not going to have problems because we're right below him on this slope.
Yeah, I know where you are.
Yeah, so our concern is the water always. So our concern is always water in the spring when we get quite a bit and we manage with it. We just don't want more. So I don't know how that's being addressed.
Well, he has to, it seems to me that he has to conform to what the Drainage Act requires. And if he puts water on your property, then there's some responsibility there. So I'm sure this gentleman's built houses before, so I'm sure he's quite familiar with that problem. You want to talk to that? Carry on.
That was our concern, really. I think it looks like it's going to be pretty big, but we have a lot of trees, like Kirk was saying, on the hill there, and that's why it's nice. So yes, if we can keep most of the trees, if we can, that would be even better. That's I'm hearing a lot of good stuff here today, so I'm feeling a little better. But again, it's just like, so as you're saying, if we have concerns later with the water, we can just address it to Dysart.
Well, I'll ask Mr. Figueroa to comment on that.
Yeah, so part of us building up that site is probably going to put in some engineered fill to build the house up, and then also bring a lot more fill at the back to absorb water. We don't want to take trees down. I'm a very, even when we work with clients on waterfront, I tell everybody, put your home up, decide later some selective trimming of some little tiny branches, 2-3 inch branches on the trees. Do not take down trees. There's bylaws in place for that reason. I know there's one that's being circulated for the waterfront of 100 feet on all the lakes in Haliburton County. So part of our process in building this house is make sure that, number one, 75% of the roof slope is sloping away from the back part of that property, which we're sloping from a high point, which is the south side, to a low point towards Sunnyside Street. So the drainage will be collected at the front side of the road, and we don't want anyone to have any ill situations due to water drainage. I've come from the city of Kawartha Lakes. I know of many lawsuits that had been circulated and gone to court regarding drainage of people's properties onto other neighboring properties. So it's not our intention to ever do that. We will follow the rules and regulations of the Ontario Building Code, and we'll make sure that the house will conform to all the permit requirements.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Danielle?
I will just read out that the comments we did receive from the chief building official in regards to the septic. So the chief building official says the sewage system will need to meet the setbacks required under the building code 2 wells. The sewage system will need to be fully raised to the bedrock at the current grade level, which was required additional setback to the well. Also, the minimum setback to the drilled well is 15 meters and roughly 16.8 for a fully raised system.
Any other questions with respect to this application? Before we draft this thing up here, are we prepared to give them some relief on the street setback or not? Walker?
I think we, did we not talk about he was agreeable? We're kind of agreeable on the 15 meters as opposed to the, and also just a question, the Sparlings, is the municipal road allowance between this project and the Sparlings?
Right.
No, the municipal road allowance is to the west of Mr. Figueroa's property,
Okay.
not abutting the Sparlings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps before we proceed, staff would propose a few conditions, and perhaps we can read those out to the committee just to ensure that everybody agrees.
Go ahead.
Perfect. So the variance applies to the lot coverage and street setbacks shown on the site plan. Prior to the putting of prior to the pouring of footings, the applicant must supply confirmation from an interior land survey that the dwelling complies with the street setback. Number 3, the applicant agrees to implement a 3-meter vegetation buffer along the south lot line to screen development from the neighboring property. And number 4 is the applicants must obtain a septic permit prior to the issuance of a building permit.
Fair enough. How do you, before we carry on, Mr. Smith, are you prepared to go at 15 meters or do you want to stick to the original 17.5?
No, I was not suggesting we stick to the 17.5. I was just questioning the 15 versus 16, given you and others seem to have measured off the neighbors at 16. But I'm prepared to go with 15.
Yeah, well, I did speak to the neighbor adjacent to, and he wasn't concerned about that. So.
Okay.
Okay, so can you write that up?
And and the lot coverage will be 17%.
17%.
Okay. I'm good with that.
Okay. It's moved and seconded the committee decision with respect to file D13 MV 2021-22 be recorded as follows. Better get my glasses on here. An increased provision of section 5.2 to permit a lot in the urban residential type 1 R1 zone to have a maximum lot coverage of 17% as opposed to the required maximum of 15%. Granted, please indicate your support by holding your hand. Decrease in the provision of section 3.30 to permit a dwelling to have a minimum street setback from Sunnyside Street of 15 meters as opposed to the required 17.5 meters. Granted, please indicate your support. Pleasure doing business with you, Mr. Figueroa.
Thank you, committee members. Have a great day.
Same to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I need a mover to close the meeting off because we're all going to lunch. We don't know where the lunch is, but moved by Mr. Bishop and second by Mr. Walker.
No need for second.
Well, my cook's in Toronto, so I'm out of luck. Be resolved, the meeting will be now adjourned at 12:26. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you all.
Enjoying the rest of the day.
Well done. Thank you kindly.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.